rare is your body. Only 10% of people are left-handed. However, they actually tend to live shorter lives. And only 1% of people in the world are ambidextrous. It means you have no preference of which hand you write and draw with. And only 1.5% of people have a single palm crease. This is mostly found in males and is a hereditary trait. And less than 1% of people have an extra rib. Most of us have 24 ribs, but some people are actually born with 25. And it's called a cervical rib. Now, 3% of people have these little X's on their palms. It's extremely rare, but it's a sign that you have strong character.
Here's what some of the most famous monsters actually are. The chupacabra. The goat-griefing livestock leech believed to be first seen in Puerto Rico was more than likely a dog with a severe case of mange, and that's when mites burrow into the skin and basically cause parasitic alopecia. Bigfoot, different animals, same beast, or whatever it was, Kobe said. Anyway, it was probably a mangy bear. Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C. What the hell mange does? Coke Bear done graduated to math. And I don't mean numbers. The Loch Ness Monster. There have been many theories, but what's most likely was probably just an escaped circus elephant with trunks out like Dragon Ball. For centuries, there have been stories of killer Cyclops, a one-eyed op to humanity. Whole time, someone probably just found an expired elephant skull in an Olympic long jump to a conclusion. And last, almost every sea monster story you've ever heard was probably just some whale freeing his willy. That's exactly what you think it is, the more you know.
These are scary what-if theories. What if everything behind you disappears, but when you look back, it reappears? What if our shadows were warning us about something in the dark because they disappear in it? What if you're the only person left on Earth and everyone and everything around us are just imaginary people and things we've made up so that we don't feel lonely? What if every time you think you hear your name being called, it's actually just your family trying to wake you up from a coma? What if the meteor that killed the dinosaurs was actually a UFO and we're the aliens?
Wholesome facts that'll make your day slightly better. Part 2. If you've already made it to the airport without dying, you shouldn't be nervous about flying because you've already made it through the deadliest part of plane travel. Whenever you pet an animal, it actually lowers your cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone. Side note, this may not work on electric eels, porcupines, or anything that could decimate you in 2 seconds. Because guinea pigs get lonely, it's actually illegal in Switzerland to own just one. You have to get at least 2 if you want to have any at all. Sometimes tarantulas will keep tiny frogs as pets. The frogs will eat small insects that would typically eat the tarantula eggs, and in exchange, the frog gets a pretty damn good bodyguard. Capybara Land is a place in Japan where you can quite literally hang out with capybaras and see them chilling in hot springs. If 99% of the world's population finds you unattractive, that would mean that 78 million people still find you attractive.
This is one of the craziest urban legends I've ever heard, and it ended up being true. So almost 100 years ago, there was an aquarium in Australia that had a giant tiger shark on display. And the legend goes that one day, in front of groups of families, the shark threw up a human arm. And not only is that true, but it opened a murder investigation. Also, this week's episode is all about Australian true urban legends, so make sure you listen. So after the shark threw up the human arm, the police had to figure out whose it was and why it was in the shark's belly. Well, the first thing the police noticed was the arm was cut cleanly, not jagged like it was from a shark bite, meaning that the arm was intentionally cut. So now it's clear that this was a murder, but whose arm is it? Well, one thing they noticed is that the arm has 2 boxers in a fighting stance tattooed on it. So they end up writing about that in the paper, and one guy who was reading it goes, "Hey, that sounds like my brother's tattoo." His brother was a man named Jim Smith, and he was involved in the seedy underbelly of Sydney society. Jimmy ran insurance fraud scams in Sydney, and he was just involved with a lot of bad people. And the last person he was seen with was one of Sydney's most notorious criminals. The story has a lot of twists, including how was he involved with the last guy he was seen with. And there's a lot of fun Australian urban legends like the story of the Button Man, so make sure you check out this week's episode.
Fun fact of the day that my small brain cannot physically comprehend. This one really did make me say, what the fuck? I want you to do me a favor and pour yourself a glass of water. Do it! Now, there is an immensely high chance that that water you're about to drink is older than the solar system. This is because it existed in ice specks floating in cosmic clouds before any of this shit came to be. Oh, and one more thing. Scientists estimate that every glass of water you drink has 100% passed through a dinosaur. So put immensely bluntly, the most vital thing humans need to survive is Jurassic Wee wee. My brain! Let's make a deal. If you didn't know these facts or they shocked you in any way, you have to share it. Now remind someone to stay hydrated today. And then immediately send them this video. We're so evil. Elon!
What's the most dangerous place on Earth? Number 8 is Lake Natron in Tanzania. The lake's so alkaline, animals get mummified. Number 7, Morgan Island. Off the coast of South Carolina, 4,000 monkeys all infected with the herpes B virus. Number 6 is Mexico's giant crystal cave, 1,000 feet underground. The cave is 113 degrees Fahrenheit and 100% humidity. 5, Oymyakon, Russia. It's the coldest town on Earth, reaching minus 50 degrees. Number 4, Runit Island. In the 70s, the US government buried radioactive plutonium. Number 3, the K2 Summit, most inhospitable mountain summit in the world. Number 2 is Snake Island, an island full of thousands of poisonous snakes. It's illegal to go here. Number 1 is North Sentinel Island, home to the indigenous people who have violently rejected contact with the outside world. So much so, if you even get close, they'll swim out to you and try to kill you.
Now this is insane. Today I learned that in a remote village in Turkey, there is a family that walks on all fours. Now these individuals have baffled scientists since they were first discovered in 2005, and initially experts couldn't explain why they were the only known humans to walk on all fours. The only theory that they had was that humans were beginning to devolve. Yes, I am not kidding. I literally just posted a YouTube video reacting to some of these insane theories. The documentary on the family got roasted so hard that they had to turn off the comments. It's pretty good, check it out. Now the real reason that they walk on all fours, and to sum it up very simply, their parents are first cousins and have 18 children. And unfortunately, because of this, they were born with an extremely rare disorder that makes them lose their sense of balance. They had no balance as babies, and instead of learning to stand upright and walk like the rest of us, they remained crawling for life.
In the moonlight, my honey, I know.
Unfortunately, on Saturday, April 20th of this year in Newport, Michigan, a child's birthday that's supposed to be filled with joy was then filled with sadness and grief. 66-year-old Marcella Chidester drove her car into Swan Boat Club where a birthday party was being hosted. There, she unalived 2 children and injured 13 other individuals. Later in court, she testified stating that she had a seizure while she was driving and that caused her to have the accident. But police testified stating that she was tested for alcohol and she was highly intoxicated at the time of the crash. Her lawyer then claimed she did have 1 glass of wine before getting behind the wheel, but police said based on her BAC, blood alcohol concentration, it's impossible she only had 1 drink. As of April 23rd, she's being held on a $1.5 million bond and is being charged with murder. Being that this case is so recent, her exact jail sentence has not yet been determined. The 2 victims are 8-year-old Lana Phillips and her younger brother 4-year-old Zane Phillips. I've put a link to a GoFundMe in the comments section for this family, and in the meantime, how long do you think Marcella should receive in jail?
Does anyone remember when they were building a freeway outside of St. Louis and they found over 200 bodies in one spot? And before I even get into it, you know that's what tonight's episode is going to be about. So outside of St. Louis, there's this one area that has all of these strange mounds. There's no hills anywhere else, so people always wondered if they were man-made. But in the 1960s, when they were building a freeway there, they had to cut through these mounds for construction. So they thought they would just cut into them and there would be dirt inside. But that was not the case. One of the mounds had 272 bodies buried inside of it. And they were like, what is going on? Is this from a serial killer? Well, 2 things. First, the bodies were in really bad shape. The skeletons were largely women, and they were all lined up in these rows. And the ones that weren't women, a couple of them had been beheaded. And the second thing is that these bodies were 1,000 years old. It turns out that these mounds were from an ancient civilization that practiced human sacrifice. And this was kind of a big discovery because historians didn't think that indigenous Americans practiced ritual sacrifice until that discovery. But why were they sacrificing people and how were they doing it? Well, if you want to know more about what was happening in the area and you maybe want to know more about human sacrifice in general, you're definitely going to want to check out tonight's episode.
These are the biggest things in the world. Up first, we have the world's biggest functioning iPhone. It was made by the YouTuber Matthew Bean. It's over 6 feet tall and yes, actually works. And this is the world's largest pizza, which is enough to feed an entire village. It was made by 5 friends in Italy in December 2012. It measures 13,580 square feet. And this is the largest truck in the world. It's the Belize dump truck. And this truck is over 65 feet long, 33 feet wide, and 26 feet tall.
These are interesting facts to tell your friends, part 1. Up first, did you know 2 days in your life will not last 24 hours? And those days are the day you were born and the day you will die. This is absolutely insane, and just wrap your head around that for a second. Next, it is almost impossible to speak the biggest word in the English language. And it's on the screen now, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce it. Next up, you only know you fell asleep when you wake up. So next time you're laying in bed trying to sleep, just know you won't know you fell asleep until you've woken up. Next up, you can feel that your toes are touching, but your brain just ignores it. Do me a favor and try and feel your toes touching. I bet you can't. Next, 90% of people after a discussion are left thinking of arguments of stuff they could have talked about. And I know I'm 100% guilty of this. Next, our brain generates about 50,000 thoughts a day. I guarantee you can't even write down 50,000 thoughts. Finally, the last person you think about before you fall asleep is the source of all of your pain or all of your joy. So just remember that.
Really weird fun facts that you might find pretty damn interesting. Number 1, banging your head against a wall for an hour burns 150 calories. Number 2, approximately 40,000 Americans are injured by toilets each year. Number 3, there's a higher chance of you being elected president of the United States than winning the lottery. Number 4, an average of 100 people choke to death on ballpoint pens each year. Number 5, it is harder to be an employee at Walmart than a student at Harvard, because Walmart has a lower acceptance rate. Number 6, human birth control pills work on gorillas. Number 7, there are 2 million millionaires in the United States. I am not one of them. And number 8, like fingerprints, every tongue print is different from person to person.
This is why you should never go swimming in a lake again. If you ever go swimming in a lake, you can get a very severe brain infection called an agleria, and it's caused by amoebas that are found in lakes and rivers. The amoeba will then start slowly eating your brain, which you would most likely die from. This is extremely rare to get, but every time you go into a lake, you actually risk getting it. So I, for one, am never going in a lake again, and I think you guys should do the same.
We are the most dangerous thing in Massachusetts. Yep, I'm talking about us, the Pookwood geese. We're those legendary forest spirits you've probably heard whispers about. We've been hanging around Massachusetts' woods since the Wampanoag tribes first called this place home. Sure, we can be a bit of a nuisance to humans, and once upon a time, we kinda got along. But then, things took a turn for the worse, and humans started coming after us hard. Ever since, we've had it out for humans, not holding back and taking them out whenever we see a chance. We're all about messing with our targets, and what we do next, well, that depends on who you run into us as. If you're a hiker who's lost, we might help you find your way, though not back to the trailhead, if you catch my drift. Out hunting, watch out for our poison arrows, and if you're a young woman, well, we've got plans that don't bear going into. Long story short, if you're wandering through Massachusetts, keep your eyes peeled and know your surroundings. Comment your name if you want to be protected. And if you have an encounter with us, get away as soon as possible because
you will never go near the woods again if you watch this documentary. It is about hunters and people who specialize in being in the wilderness who just vanish without a trace. And I'm not talking like they wander into the woods and just go missing. In one of these cases, a guy went into the woods with a group of his friends and they went hunting. He was only about a couple of feet away from them when suddenly they turned around and he was gone. In many of these cases, massive search parties are released to try to find these people, and they are never found. A couple of theories are discussed in this doc, like paranormal theories, Sasquatch theories, ideas that maybe they fell into crevasses. If trained professionals are going missing in the wilderness, you bet your ass I'm not going anywhere near the woods. Let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced anything weird in the wilderness, and hit follow for more docs to watch.
A woman who was missing for 30 years was just found alive in Puerto Rico. So Patricia Copta vanished without a trace from her home in Pennsylvania in 1992. The situation surrounding her disappearance was a little strange and scary because Patricia's mental health had been getting worse and worse over the years. So when she disappeared, the police told her younger sister and husband that they thought she left on her own accord and basically closed the case. They thought that she would maybe come back, but then 30 years went by with no phone calls and no contact. Everyone in her life had assumed she passed away. But recently, an 83-year-old woman in an elderly home in Puerto Rico started opening up to a nurse for the first time. The woman had been diagnosed with dementia and started bringing up things in her life that she had never spoken about before. This alarmed one of the nurses at the facility, who contacted authorities to get a DNA test because she started believing that this woman was a missing woman from the United States. And sure enough, it was Patricia. She had never told anyone about her previous life and had never contacted her family. Her husband and sister were contacted because they're still alive and they were shocked.
This 12-year-old girl unalived her entire family so she could be with her 23-year-old boyfriend. Jasmine Richardson was a normal kid until she turned 11 years old. She started dressing in a darker aesthetic, liking some darker things. She would post on websites like MySpace and vampirefreaks.com, telling people she was 15 instead of 11. Because the thing about Jasmine is, even though she was 11, she didn't look 11. She always kind of looked older than she actually was. She started sneaking out to hang out with her new older friends and would meet older guys. By the time that Jasmine was 12 years old, she was in a full-on relationship with this freak, 23-year-old Jeremy. And just so you know, just because she was lying about her age on social media, this guy was fully aware that his girlfriend was 12 years old, a literal preteen, and he would also tell people that he was a 300-year-old werewolf. So for context, we are dealing with a full-on freak. Jasmine's parents were horrified when they found out that their 12-year-old daughter was online telling people that she was older than she actually was and that she was dating a full-on adult. So they did their best to keep Jeremy away. Jasmine and Jeremy didn't want to be apart, and they thought that the only way that they could be together is if Jasmine's parents were no longer alive. What started out as jokes became real plans to not only unalive Jasmine's parents, but her 8-year-old brother as well. On April 22nd, 2006, Jasmine secretly let Jeremy into her home where he brutally unalived her parents. Jasmine's 8-year-old brother, Jacob, heard the entire thing while hiding in his room holding his lightsaber for protection. It's like heart-shattering. It's unclear who actually unalived 8-year-old Jacob because Jasmine and Jeremy blame each other for his death. Jasmine and Jeremy thought that they were soulmates, and now with her parents out of the picture, they were going to be together forever. But in reality, that was not the case. They were actually quickly brought to justice because they were bragging to anyone that would listen about what they had just done to her entire family. And of course, as soon as they were arrested, the soulmates turned on each other. Jeremy was sentenced to 3 life sentences, but due to Jasmine's age, she only served 6 years in a rehabilitation center and 4 years on probation. She was fully released into society in 2017 and has been out living in society free as a bird ever since under a new name. Actually, a lot of controversy in this case because of that, but what do you think? Do you think Jasmine is a victim, a child manipulated by a predator, or do you think if she's old enough to do the crime, she's old enough to do the time?
Terrifying facts you never knew. If your immune system ever found out that you have eyeballs, you would go blind. Which means right now your immune system has no clue that you can see. Because if it did, they would attack your eyeballs until you could no longer ever see. This is because your eyeballs have a protein in them called crystalline that doesn't exist anywhere else in your body. So if your immune system found out and checked them out, it would be like, something's wrong here. Studies show that most serial killers are born in November. Today's high school students have the same anxiety levels as insane asylum patients had in the 1950s. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, my anxiety might be up there too. There's a disease called fatal familial insomnia, where people suddenly one day lose their ability to fall asleep, which leads them to slowly go insane. They can't distinguish dreams from reality anymore and go into some type of paranoia. It becomes so severe that they eventually die. Those that make it to the final stage and don't die usually end up in a vegetated state, no longer conscious. And it can happen to any one of you. About 3,000 people go missing every year in the United States. The last execution by guillotine was in 1977. This was in France. And also that was the same year the first Star Wars movie came out. You are always 6 minutes away from death, but breathing resets the clock. In 2011, Anatoly Yakovlevich was arrested for having 12 dolls in his apartment. Only problem is, They weren't normal dolls. They were recently deceased little girls that had been dug up and dressed to be put on display. In 2012, a Burger King employee anonymously posted this to 4chan. It said, "This is the lettuce you eat at Burger King." It only took 20 minutes for people to track down the branch that he worked at, and he was fired. You really never know what people are doing to your food. H.H. Holmes was a serial killer who built a torture hotel in the 19th century. He had secret rooms with gas chambers, trap doors, and stairs that led to nowhere. He loved to play with his victims' minds. It was almost like a real-life Saw movie. There's a bridge in Scotland called the Overtoun Bridge, and for some reason, dogs keep jumping off of it at the same spot. Yeah, they just jump to their deaths. Experts can't figure out why either. Some people speculate it's a magnetic field, or maybe a frequency that only they can hear, but others believe it's something supernatural. But whatever is making dogs jump off that bridge to their deaths is still to this day unexplained. Joe Matheny was an infamous serial killer who not only cooked his victims to eat for himself, but also made them into burgers using their remains. He then sold them to unsuspecting customers from a roadside food stand. We really never know what we eating. I'm cooking all my food myself. That's why I don't eat over people's house. In 2021, a new homeowner was shocked to find a boarded up wall. When he ripped the boards off the wall, he discovered a hole. In that hole was a doll clutching a note. The note saying that she killed a family who lived there in the 1960s. Be honest, would you move out? In 1978, there was a pilot named Frederick Valentin. Him and his plane disappeared in Australia. His last communication was, "Melbourne, that strange aircraft is hovering above me again." It is hovering and it is not an aircraft. This is a mugshot of William West and William West. Oh, and they're not related at all, but they were both sent to Leavenworth Prison at the exact same time in 1903. And after some confusion, the staff finally figured out they were two different people who had the exact same name and looked identical. This was said to be one of the main reasons why we now use fingerprints to identify somebody. There's biotech being developed as we speak that can make prisoners feel they are serving an 1,000-year sentence in a matter of 8 hours. That's horrifying. Imagine thinking you spent 1,000 years somewhere, and then when you wake up and snap out of it, you realize that it was only a couple hours. Do you know how crazy that is? Anyways, like this video if you want a part 2.